I'm Panchali Illankoon, and today we'll be talking about sexuality education. So before we start off, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening. I'm Dakshitha Wickremarathne. Currently I work for YPS Sri Lanka, which is the only youth-led organization in Sri Lanka working for sexual and reproductive health and rights. And it is being supported by United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA Sri Lanka. And also, I'm wearing a couple of hats at the same time. So I'm serving as the commissioner for the Lancet Commission on Adolescent Health and Wellbeing, which is a sort of a global research-based organization. And also I'm one of the members of the United Nations Youth Advisory Panel in Sri Lanka. And I also serve as an advisor to the UN Women Global Civil Society Advisory Group.
So why do you believe that sexual education is so important, and how do you believe that teachers or even parents should approach when teaching sexuality education?
Well, actually, what we need to look at is what is the root cause for the problem, and we see it as the generation gap. Because imagine a young person who's like 13, 14, or even 15, learning something very personal about their body, their rights, their decision making from someone who's like in the age group between 30 to 60. It makes very, the young person would feel definitely uncomfortable in listening something from the person, and also the teacher would be feeling the same thing. That has been the case throughout in terms of doing sexuality education in schools, and that has created so many other barriers as well. So I think what need to be done is to conduct proper teacher training programs in teacher training schools, and also to have a comprehensive curriculum in schools about comprehensive sexuality education.
So in Sri Lanka we have different approaches for sexuality education. What is the best approach for approaching sexuality education?
That's a very good question, because sexuality education is not only about learning how to engage in sex. It's a much more broader term, because it talks about different concepts and different principles. For example, UNESCO has introduced international technical guideline with the support of UNAIDS, World Health Organization, and UNFPA on how to conduct comprehensive sexual education programs in different countries. So this guideline speaks about different approaches, different ways of conducting comprehensive sexual education. So according to this guideline, there are 6 main concepts on which should be included in any curriculum. So this speaks about relationships, this speaks about values and attitudes, this speaks about sexual and reproductive health, this speaks about sexuality, and also about respecting each other and prevention of violence. So the broader term actually provide kind of a platform for any student to develop their communication skills, decision-making power, negotiation skills. So it's not only about making them sort of empowered on how to engage in protected sex, but it's also about developing them as individuals and develop their their health and their rights in order to get their full potential. And it should definitely contribute to the development of the country as well, because whenever the health of the young people has been increased, then the labor force would be benefited by that, and the labor force would definitely would be an investment for the development of the country.
So there's obviously going to be differences in teaching sexuality education in both rural and urban areas, and there is a huge gap in between those teaching. How do you bridge the gap?
One thing we have realized by conducting several workshops and also training programs in different parts of the country is that it actually doesn't matter which background the young people are coming from, whether it's urban or whether it's rural or whether it's semi-urban, because there are so many myths prevailing in terms of sexual education. Like Sarah said before, sexuality and sex itself is a very taboo topic in the country. So whenever a topic is very taboo, people don't discuss about it, and there are so many myths, sort of transferring around it. So we conduct sessions in Colombo, and sometimes we get questions from young people about basic things of their reproductive health or reproductive systems, whereas sometimes young people in rural areas like the Kataragama or Monaragala or Batiklo or Komali, sometimes they know that, and also it could be vice versa as well. So it actually doesn't matter from where these young people are coming from, but what we really need to understand is that there's a lack of information, and even the information is available is not accurate. So this is a huge problem, because whenever the information is not accurate, for an example, there's a huge sort of a wave of like reaching out to internet and getting information, but how accurate the information available in the internet, and they make decisions depending on this information, and whenever the information is not accurate, decision they make probably wouldn't be a correct decision, and this would lead to different other issues like teenage pregnancies, for example, and also HIV and AIDS, maybe sexually transmitted infections, unwanted pregnancies. So all these issues would be tackled down if comprehensive sexual education is available, irrespective whether it's rural or urban.
And let's talk about how we should improve sexuality education, because we established that we have a need for sexuality education to be improved. How do we improve it, and how do we teach the children about safe sex, about their hormones and reproductive organs?
Like one of the major challenges we have faced so far by pushing for comprehensive sexual education is that the senior people in policy making levels or decision making capacities say that you don't need to talk about sexuality or sexual education with young people, because then they would engage more having sex with others. So the simple example we use is that, okay, you teach martial arts to students, and would they start fighting on streets? Like we teach sexual education to students, they won't go and have sex because we teach them sexual education. It's their right to have sex or not, and if they know how to have sex properly with protecting themselves, then they would definitely either stay until they are ready to have sex, or if they really want to have sex, they'll have protected sex. So that is the basic thing we need to understand. And what we really need to do in terms of advancing this effort is to sort of have a kind of a 360 effort of getting different stakeholders, rather I would say multi-stakeholder approach, not only the government but also different civil society partners, international development agencies like United Nations, and also like religious groups, who are quite capable of making decisions in a country where there's different religions, different cultures, and huge set of people who are believers of different kind of faiths. So it's important to get the sort of a consent, the comments, the views of these stakeholders, and bring them to a common platform to discuss about this, and then to link it with the policies which are currently in place. There are so many policies in place which basically accept the fact that comprehensive sexual education is important. Sri Lanka formulated the new national youth policy in 2013, and it clearly says that in terms of health and education sections, that it's important for young people to get accurate information on comprehensive sexuality and sexual and reproductive health and rights. So what is required now is to implement these policies which are already in place, and to get the support from different multi-stakeholders who would be able to make quite important decisions in terms of implementing and pushing forward the decision makers to implement these policies.
All right, so now that we've set the foundation to talking about sexuality education, how would you encourage teachers to tackle this subject in a school environment? How would you encourage them to talk to the children?
Like it might be a little bit of not convenient for a teacher to talk about sexuality with a set of young people. So that's why it's important to use different approaches, different methodologies in giving information. So several things we in our organization, which is YP Sri Lanka, are doing is that we use a new concept called edutainment, which is a combination of education and entertainment. So we do not use the usual lecture delivery process, but we conduct different activities, group work, role plays, and get people on board, and it's fun to learn about their sexuality, so it wouldn't be boring, so you sit down on a class and listen to someone who's drawing stuff on a whiteboard. So it's one approach. The other one is, the current generation is getting more and more techno-savvy. So what we have realized is that, okay, why not we use this technology to provide this information? So we have sort of designed a kind of a software called Cyberpeer, where it has different modules. It's like a game, and it has access to young people with visual disabilities as well, where we have the hearing component sort of integrated into the module. So you could, any young person could do it by themselves. It's just a matter of having the CD and installing it in their laptop or the computer, and then there are different games, there are different videos, so you go through them, and there are different modules, and after every module you get a question paper, like a self-generated question paper. So you do it, and if you have got enough marks, then you could move on to the next module. If you haven't, you could do it again and again, and there's no necessity to do it at once. Like you can do one module like within one day, and do it go for the next module in another next month, or whatever it is. So it's very flexible, and it's very fun as well. And it's not like you're listening to someone, it's more like you're playing a game. It's inside the computer, so it's very convenient for any young person to do it. So what we are trying to do is to sort of make this software available in the university system, so that university students would be able to do it. And we are also looking at making it a mobile app, where the Android or the Apple users could download it and do it, and have it inside their phones.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about the projects you're doing here and around the world. What kind of projects have you engaged yourself in to provide sexuality education to children?
We basically work in two areas. One is the community level, where we implement and conduct projects or programs, and also in the macro level, where we sort of design and formulate policies which help the governments to sort of start implementing on comparative sexual education. So in terms of projects, apart from the ones I have discussed before, one thing we have realized is that obviously the general young people have difficulties in getting accurate information on sexuality and reproductive health and rights. What about young people who are marginalized? So what we have realized is that there are different kind of marginalized youth communities living in Sri Lanka. For an example, indigenous communities, young people living in post-war areas, young people with disabilities. So we have started different projects with these different marginalized communities. And what we are doing at the moment is we are working closely with young people having hearing disabilities, or you could also say young people living with deafness. And they have major issues, accessing information on sexual and reproductive health, whereas the general youth has problems on accessing information. Imagining a person who cannot hear properly, getting this information. So what we are trying to do is to sort of come up with the sign language, the terminology, where there would be specific signs for the words we use when conducting comparative sexual education, like different parts of your anatomy, different words like violence, rape, abuse, and then also to sort of train sign language interpreters, who are the ones who are bridging the gap between these youth living with hearing disabilities and the information, so that they would be sensitized and they know what is sexual and reproductive health and rights are, and also what is comparative sexual education is. And these interpreters would be able to provide information for these young people who are with hearing disabilities, and also to then to go beyond that level and train young people with hearing disabilities themselves, so that they could be trainers among their communities, and it would be more comfortable when I belong to a particular community and someone who's a peer of mine from the same community giving me the information I need, rather than someone who's kind of an alien who's out from my community coming and giving me information, so that I would feel more comfortable listening to the person I know than listening to someone who I actually don't know.
All right then. Thank you so much.
All right.